For 1,000 years, no army had ever breached these walls. Yet one dawn, thunderous cannons shook the earth, and the sea itself was outflanked as warships rolled across the very land. Outnumbered 10 to 1, a desperate city stood against the storm of fire and steel. Would faith and courage preserve an ancient world, or would a young conqueror's vision shatter it and forge a new age? Constantinople was no ordinary city. Founded in 330 AD by Constantine the Great, it was the capital of the Byzantine Empire and the gateway between Europe and Asia. Whoever controlled it commanded trade, armies, and influence over 2 continents. For centuries, both Christian and Muslim rulers had dreamed of possessing it. By the mid-15th century, the Byzantine Empire was only a shadow of its past. Once stretching across the Mediterranean, it was now reduced to the city itself and a few scraps of territory. Its people, about 50,000, struggled to survive. Yet Constantinople still stood as a symbol, the last stronghold of Eastern Christianity and the legacy of the Roman Empire. To the rising Ottoman Empire, Constantinople was more than a prize. For Sultan Mehmed II, who took the throne at just 21, the city was an obsession. He believed that conquering it would fulfill a prophecy, that one day a great Muslim ruler would claim the city of Constantine. For Mehmed, it was also the key to controlling trade between East and West, making the Ottomans a true world power. Mehmed prepared carefully. He gathered perhaps 80,000 to 100,000 soldiers, cavalry, infantry, archers, and his elite janissaries. Slave soldiers trained from childhood to be utterly loyal. But his greatest weapon was not manpower. It was technology. Mehmed hired a Hungarian engineer named Orban, who had designed cannons larger than anything seen before. His masterpiece, the Great Bombard, was a bronze monster over 8 meters long, firing stone balls weighing nearly half a ton. These weapons could break down walls that had withstood every attack for 1,000 years. The Byzantines, led by Emperor Constantine XI, had perhaps 7,000 to 8,000 defenders, including 2,000 Genoese mercenaries commanded by Giovanni Giustiniani. They trusted in their legendary Theodosian Walls, 3 layers of defenses stretching 6 kilometers. For a millennium, these walls had stopped Huns, Persians, Arabs, and even Crusaders. No one had ever breached them. But in 1453, the defenders faced something new: the thunder of gunpowder and the crushing power of Mehmed's cannons. The old world of swords and stone was about to collide with the new world of fire and iron. In April 1453, the Ottoman army appeared outside the city. Tents stretched across the plain. The giant cannons were rolled into position. The fate of Constantinople and the future of Europe was about to be decided. On April 6, 1453, the earth around Constantinople trembled. That morning, Mehmed II's forces, nearly 100,000 strong, marched into their final positions outside the walls. Tents covered the plains, banners of the crescent moon waved in the wind, and the air filled with the sound of drums and war cries. Then the silence was broken. With a deep rolling thunder, the first cannon shot roared across the land. A massive stone ball crashed against the Theodosian Walls, sending clouds of dust and fragments into the air. For the first time in 1,000 years, the defenders heard the terrifying sound of their walls being struck by weapons built not of iron and wood, but of fire and gunpowder. The siege of Constantinople had truly begun. Mehmed divided his army into 3 great sections. On the right wing, soldiers from Anatolia, modern-day Turkey. On the left, troops from the Balkans. At the center, opposite the strongest stretch of the walls, stood the janissaries, the elite corps trained from childhood to be utterly loyal to the Sultan. Behind them, the giant bombards were positioned. The Great Bombard, Orban's masterpiece, was so huge it needed a team of 60 oxen just to move. Each time it fired, the ground shook like an earthquake. The Ottomans also controlled the seas. Mehmed's fleet of more than 100 warships gathered outside the Golden Horn in the Sea of Marmara. But the Byzantines had a secret weapon, a massive iron chain stretched across the mouth of the Golden Horn Harbor. As long as the chain held, Ottoman ships could not force their way inside and attack the weakest part of the city's defenses. Inside Constantinople, Emperor Constantine XI walked the walls to rally his men. Only 7,000 to 8,000 defenders stood against the Ottoman tide. Among them, the most vital were the 2,000 Genoese mercenaries under Giovanni Giustiniani, whose experience in siege warfare made him indispensable. Wherever the fighting was fiercest, Giustiniani and his men would be sent. The days that followed became a brutal rhythm. The cannons thundered by day, tearing stones from the ancient walls. By night, Byzantine soldiers worked tirelessly to repair the breaches, filling them with earth, wood, and rubble. Mehmed's infantry launched repeated night assaults, climbing ladders into storms of arrows, rocks, and boiling oil. Again and again, they were driven back with heavy losses. But Mehmed did not relent. He believed time was on his side. Every cannon shot weakened the walls. Every assault tested the defenders' strength. And slowly the ancient fortress was being worn down. For the Byzantines, hope flickered only once. On April 20th, 3 small Christian supply ships, escorted by a large Byzantine vessel, attempted to break through the Ottoman blockade. In a dramatic naval clash, the outnumbered ships managed to push past dozens of Ottoman galleys and reach the Golden Horn. The city erupted in celebration. The defenders cheered from the walls and church bells rang across Constantinople. But everyone knew this was a small victory. Supplies were limited, and no great army was coming to save them. By late April, it was clear Constantinople could resist for a time, but not forever. Mehmed was already preparing his next bold move, a plan that would change the course of the siege. By late April 1453, Mehmed realized that his fleet could not break the chain blocking the Golden Horn. The iron barrier stretched across the harbor like a wall on water. As long as it held, the Byzantines could keep part of their defenses safe. So the young sultan devised a plan that stunned even his own commanders. If his ships could not sail into the harbor, he would carry them overland. Mehmed ordered a path to be cleared over the hills of Galata, the district north of the Golden Horn. Wooden planks were laid down, greased with animal fat to make them slippery. One by one, Ottoman galleys were dragged out of the water, placed on rolling logs, and hauled across the land by teams of oxen and men. Drums thundered, soldiers shouted, and the people of Constantinople watched in disbelief from their walls. On the morning of April 22nd, the impossible became reality. Dozens of Ottoman ships slid down into the Golden Horn behind the chain that had kept them out. Now, for the first time, the Byzantine defenders faced an enemy fleet inside their own harbor. Panic spread through the city. The Golden Horn had always been the weak point of Constantinople, its walls lower and less fortified than those on land. The chain had been their shield, but now that shield was gone. Constantine XI and Giustiniani rushed to move men and artillery to cover the harbor. The defenders fired from towers and ships, desperately trying to hold back the Ottoman navy. Skirmishes erupted on the water as Venetian and Genoese vessels fought against the new arrivals. Still, the psychological blow was enormous. For the first time, the people of Constantinople realized they were completely surrounded. There was no safe flank, no gap in the Ottoman net. At the same time, Mehmed's cannons continued their relentless pounding against the land walls. Day after day, the massive stone balls tore new gaps, while the Byzantines scrambled to patch them. The defenders were exhausted, food was scarce, and every night seemed darker than the last. Yet the city still held. The defenders fought with courage, clinging to their ancient faith in the hope of a miracle. But Mehmed was preparing something greater, a final assault that would decide the fate of the empire. By early May, the siege had turned into a nightmare. Every day the giant bombards fired, their thunder echoing across the land and sea. The stones smashed into the walls, tearing gaps wide enough for dozens of men to march through. And every night, the defenders scrambled desperately to fill the breaches before dawn. On the nights of May 7th and May 12th, Mehmed launched massive assaults. Thousands of Ottoman soldiers rushed forward under the cover of darkness, ladders slamming against the walls. The Byzantines, fighting with everything they had, rained down arrows, rocks, and even boiling oil. In the torchlight, shadows writhed across the battlements as men fought hand to hand. Swords clashed, spears thrust, and screams of the dying filled the night. At one breach, Janissaries surged forward with their terrifying discipline. Shields raised, voices chanting, they advanced step by step despite the storm of missiles. On the walls above, Justiniani's mercenaries hacked and stabbed, pushing ladders back, toppling men into the darkness below. When the fighting ended, the ground was littered with bodies, but the city still stood. Constantinople was bleeding, but alive. Inside the walls, the people prayed endlessly in the Hagia Sophia, the great church of the city. They lit candles, sang hymns, and begged for divine aid. Every rumble of the cannons shook the building's golden dome, reminding them that their world was collapsing outside. By mid-May, Mehmed grew impatient. He pushed his men harder. Fresh attacks battered the defenders almost every night. The Ottoman soldiers dug trenches, built ramps, and brought smaller cannons closer to the walls, firing point blank into the stone. The defenders, exhausted and hungry, began to falter. Still, Constantine XI refused to surrender. He walked the walls daily, speaking to soldiers by name, reminding them they were the last guardians of Rome's legacy. His courage kept hope alive, but all knew the city could not last forever. The clash of fire and steel continued, day after day, night after night. Constantinople was becoming a graveyard, yet its people still held on, waiting for the storm they knew was coming. Mehmed's final, all-out assault. On the night of May 28, 1453, Constantinople was silent. For weeks, the city had endured cannon fire, assaults, and hunger. Now everyone knew the end was near. In the Hagia Sophia, thousands gathered for a final service. Greeks, Latins, soldiers, and civilians prayed together. For one night, old divisions were forgotten. At dawn on May 29th, the storm began. Mehmed unleashed his full fury. Drums thundered, horns blared, and waves of soldiers rushed forward. The first assaults were by irregular troops, Ottoman volunteers sent to wear down the defenders. They charged, shouting and climbing ladders, but were cut down by arrows and swords. Their blood stained the moat, but they had done their job. They tired the defenders. The second wave followed, regular troops from Anatolia and the Balkans. They pressed the walls harder, filling the breaches with their dead as they tried to climb. Arrows darkened the sky, rocks crashed down, and the defenders fought like men possessed. Still, the pressure grew. Then came the third wave, the Janissaries. Mehmed's elite, his pride. They marched forward in silence at first, shields raised, their discipline chilling to behold. When they reached the breaches, they roared as one and surged upward. The battle turned into chaos. Swords clashed, shields shattered, men grappled hand to hand on the walls. Justiniani was gravely wounded, carried away bleeding. His loss shook the defenders. Morale collapsed. At a section of the wall known as the Kerkaporta Gate, a small postern door had been left unsecured. Ottoman soldiers found it and forced their way inside. Soon after, a larger breach opened under relentless cannon fire. Janissaries poured into the city. Realizing the walls were lost, Emperor Constantine XI threw off his imperial regalia and fought as a common soldier. With sword in hand, he led his men into the melee. Witnesses later claimed his last words were, "The city is lost, but I live no longer as emperor." Surrounded by enemies, he disappeared into the press of battle, never to be seen again. By mid-morning, the defenders were overwhelmed. Ottoman banners rose above the towers. Soldiers swarmed through the streets. The gates were thrown open, and Mehmed's army surged into Constantinople. After more than 1,000 years, the city had fallen. The Byzantine Empire was no more. As the sun rose higher on May 29th, 1453, the banners of the crescent moon flew above Constantinople. The great city, once the jewel of the Christian East, had fallen. For 3 days, the Ottomans claimed their prize, as was the custom of conquest. Churches, palaces, and homes were looted. The cries of the conquered echoed through the streets. At last, Sultan Mehmed II entered the city. Riding through the gates, he gazed at the ruins of battle and the mighty Hagia Sophia rising above the skyline. He dismounted, entered the great church, and ordered it to be converted into a mosque. In that moment, Mehmed became known to history as Mehmed the Conqueror. For the Ottomans, it was a triumph beyond measure. Constantinople became their new capital, later called Istanbul, the heart of an empire that would last for centuries. From here, the Ottomans would expand deep into Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. For the Christian world, it was a disaster. The Byzantine Empire, the last remnant of Rome, was gone forever. Many in Europe were shocked. If Constantinople could fall, what city was safe? Fear spread across Christendom, and calls for new crusades echoed, though they came too late. Yet out of this tragedy came change. The fall of Constantinople cut off trade routes to the east, forcing Europeans to seek new paths by sea. Within decades, explorers like Columbus and Vasco da Gama would sail into the unknown, ushering in the age of discovery. Scholars fleeing the fallen city carried ancient manuscripts to Italy, fueling the Renaissance. Thus, May 29, 1453, was not only the end of Constantinople, but also the end of the Middle Ages. A new world was beginning, shaped by gunpowder, exploration, and empires rising from the ashes of the old.